Thanks for joining us today on our podcast, This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. And this is pretty cool. We're going to talk all things real estate specific to Florida today. And pretty cool. We're joined by Tim Weisheyer, who is the president of Florida Realtors. Tim, why don't you give us the broad picture? What is this group? And yeah, you said it's got a distinction as one of the largest in the nation.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ken. Honored to be with you. Yeah, I do have the honor of serving as president of Florida Realtors. As mentioned, Florida Realtors is not only the largest professional trade organization in the state of Florida, we are also actually the largest realtor association in the United States. We represent over 220,000 realtors in the state, but what I always say is we really represent over 220,000 small businesses. We understand that the work that we do as an association to support our members, really what we're doing is we're supporting 1/5 of the state economy in the state of Florida. And we
Wow.
understand that every decision we make doesn't just impact our members, but it impacts every single community across all 67 counties. And it certainly impacts the economic well-being of our state.
Yeah, no kidding. So let's talk. Let's start with housing market in Florida. What are kind of the trends you're seeing right now? Is it a hot seller's market, buyer's market? It's kind of in between. Where are we at?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. There's a lot of misunderstanding right now about what really is and what isn't happening in real estate, particularly in the state of Florida. Number one, we're certainly going through a transition. What I always tell people is we're now in a more normalized and stable market. The color I like to paint on the page here is that Florida was really a white hot real estate market, particularly coming out of COVID-19. There was a major influx of people moving into our state. It not only drove up the number of sales and transactions that were being realized, but it also drove up home prices as well. And what we always knew is that that type of increase, whether it was the number of units sold or the amount of value and appreciation that people were seeing, was unsustainable. At some point, it would have to slow down and moderate. And in truth, that's what we really have been seeing is although we're looking right now at the number of units sold year over year as a decline from 2024, when you put it in perspective, we're really at par of where we would typically be. And part of my job as the official voice of real estate in Florida is to help share that story because what we know is that people are often confused and concerned about what do they do about real estate. And when all these headlines are painting a picture of sales in Florida declining, they have a skewed perspective of what that really means. And they have to understand we're coming off of something incredibly high and we're moderating to something that's very normal.
I've heard people describe it for real estate markets. Hey, there's a pendulum, and that recently those highs, hey, that was one end, and now it's kind of swinging back toward the middle. Do you anticipate an additional swing? Are we going to go in the negative, at least in whatever factor people are looking at it, whether they're selling or buying and that kind of thing?
No, I think we're really starting to get to equilibrium. So when you look at the marketplace as a whole, I think we want to bifurcate it into two parts, single family homes and then condominiums. Obviously, there's another part of the marketplace, which is the commercial market as well, which I'm glad to opine on and speak
Yeah.
of, but specifically to residential. When you look at what's going on with single family homes, really the year over year home prices are pretty stabilized. In fact, when you look at it as a trend, since 2022, home prices pretty much leveled off in the state of Florida with single family homes. When you look at on the condominium side, we have seen a slight price decline across the state. Of course, condos only make up 20% of our entire marketplace. And so when people are talking about seeing any type of price decline in condominiums, they want to understand, number one, what's really driving that? And number two, what does that really represent in the overall real estate ecosystem in the state? So 80% of the marketplace is stabilized with about 5.5 months supply of inventory. So that means that buyers right now are in one of the best positions they've been in the last handful of years, where there's enough inventory out there to where a buyer gets to pick and choose what home do I really want? Does it have the features, the location, and the amenities that I'm looking for, not just in the home, but in the location and the proximity. When you look about condominiums and you say, okay, well, condos were sitting over 10 months supply of inventory. And the question that I would want people to ask is why? Why does that sound high? Well, we have to understand that after the collapse of the Surfside Tower in South Florida, there was major reforms that went into place in the condominium market. And Florida Realtors have been working with the Florida legislature to increase the transparency around what's happening with condominiums within the state. And it's not just from a safety and security standpoint because of Surfside, but what it really is around the financial components of the well-being of the condominium associations that are managing those properties. And so we were successful in this legislative session of getting an additional layer of transparency passed through law that ultimately ensures that condo associations provide meeting documents, finances, and governing documents to home buyers early in the process, and it gives them more time to really look at what's going on. The reason that's important when I'm answering the question about what's happening with real estate sales as a whole is that there were a lot of people in 2024 and the beginning of 25 in the condominium market that were just pausing. They wanted to see what was really going to happen and what was going to be the impact of these reforms that were going in place and what was going to ultimately be the impact on condo associations and what they need to do to make sure their financial reserves were put in place. We believe coming out of this legislative session with the governor signing that into law, it will reintroduce a stabilization to the condominium market in Florida that we'll start to see manifest as the months continue.
Yeah, that notion of the reserves, that was a barrier to some people who at the time didn't know what the future was going to be because of the Surfside collapse. And hey, we know lawmakers are going to try and make an adjustment somehow. So you feel like the most current legislative session and what came out of that, what the governor signed into law, really will help balance that out a little bit.
It will. It's certainly a step in the right direction. It's look, we as the Realtor Association are all about transparency. So that law certainly adds a new layer of transparency for the marketplace. It also adds a layer of calmness and certainty. And so we know it's only going to have a positive effect. And now it'll just be a matter of looking at over time, over the next number of months, what does that really look like? And how does it start to benefit and impact the condominium market?
You know, it's interesting when you look at Florida versus maybe nationwide trends. I've got family and friends up in Pennsylvania, and they were describing to me this past week that they were going through what we saw in Florida months and months ago, where somebody would, for a residential property, the listing would come out on a Thursday, and Saturday they planned on having an open house, but by Friday, people had outbid each other, and it never even got to an open house.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
mean,
not
that's
happening here right now.
No, not really. I mean, there's still some areas where you're seeing quite a bit of demand. One of the things that we benefit from, let's be honest, is not just our weather, the business environment of the state, the fact that we're one of the number one states in the nation for new job creation and small business formation. But we attract a lot of people in the Florida, and that will only continue. So there are markets where you're seeing properties go on the market and sell pretty quick, but we've also now gotten to a place where you're looking somewhere between a 30 and 50-day time period for a property to sell. Now, I'm in my 29th year as a real estate professional in the state. And so I've been through all types of market seasons and
Yeah.
market adjustments, including the Great Recession, prior recessions, a pandemic. And so what I'm really communicating to those that I serve and my company serve, and certainly my role as president, is that it's normal. We're in a good place. This is the type of market you really want to where you do have time to shop the market and really understand what's out there and really weigh your options. And for a seller, you don't have to worry about putting a sign in your yard and 36 hours later, all of a sudden, where am I going to go? Where am I going to move to? I believe it's actually a very healthy market. My job is to communicate to our members and to the marketplace. Thank goodness that we're in a state where people want to be here and they'll continue to move here. We'll continue to see a desire and demand for our market, but we're in a place now where we're really stabilized, and I'm really glad about that.
Tim Weisheyer is the president of Florida Realtors and our guest today. And so let's talk on the commercial real estate side. What are the trends happening there right now?
Yeah, the number one impact on commercial has really been the cost of capital. And when you look at interest rates and what's been happening there, underwriting large scale commercial development projects is always complex and it always comes down to leverage. And so you saw two trends that were happening in the pandemic. Number one, work from home was really impacting offices and how many office buildings were being utilized. Number two is retail because you saw a big emergence of e-commerce and what was happening there. And so those two asset classes really were the ones that struggled the most as we moved through COVID and came out on the other side of the pandemic. At the same time, though, the industrial market and light industrial market was really on fire, and you saw a lot of new industrial product being built, and that's still the case today. The only factor in commercial right now is really the cost of debt. When we're looking at 6.5 to 7% interest rates, which are really normal rates when you think about it, the 50-year average of interest rates in the United States is 7.71% for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. We're at about 6.75 right now. So we're actually in a very normal interest rate environment. But from a commercial standpoint, even residential too, but from a commercial standpoint specifically, it's what does it cost to underwrite that project? And with the cost of debt being a little bit higher, it means that we have to make sure that the deal can pencil out. Commercial is always based upon production, meaning how much can I sell out of the building that I'm building from a retail standpoint? How much rent can I derive if I'm doing multifamily, or how much rent can I derive if I'm leasing it out for medical office, retail, or industrial purposes? And the market sets that standard. So everything else works backwards and down from there. And ultimately, the last factor that gets adjusted because the cost of capital, commodities, labor, all those things remain the same. It really then comes down with the cost of capital being what it is, what's going to be the underlying land value. And that's really what the market's adjusting to now. What should somebody pay for a piece of dirt that's greenfield to go vertical to bring new development into the state?
Let's shift just a little bit into something that Floridians deal with every summer for several months, and that would be hurricane season. We're into it. Last week of June, we had our first named storm out in the Atlantic, and it was a nothing burger, a fish storm, as they call them. But how does hurricane season typically affect the real estate market in Florida, especially people deciding whether they're going to buy or sell? Is there a pause because of hurricane season?
When you said something we deal with every year in Florida in the summer, I thought you were going to talk about beaches, surfing, fishing, and sunshine, but I'll go with hurricanes too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that
That
is
other
part
stuff
of
is a
it.
lot more fun, really.
Yeah, no doubt about that. What I always tell people is you live in a subtropical climate on a peninsula surrounded by bodies of water. You understand you're going to deal with hurricanes. And really, wherever you live in the nation, you're going to deal with something. It's going to be a blizzard, a nor'easter, a hurricane, a tornado, an earthquake, whatever it may be. The nice thing about hurricanes is that we can prepare and predict them. And we have a really good modeling system that says, hey, we think we're going to have a number of storms. This is what we think they're going to look like. And oh, by the way, this is where they're coming. What I try to get people to understand is anytime a storm comes to the state of Florida, much like yourself, I get communication from all around the country, and people are like, oh my gosh, I saw there's a storm coming. Is the state okay? I'm like, no, we're fine. It's hitting one very small,
Right.
isolated area of the state. It's going to dissipate. Yes, we have storms that have significant impact, like we saw last year. But when it comes to real estate, what you really see is that nothing changes up until the time that the storm is about to hit, and that's only in the areas that are directly impacted. And it's really just a short pause. Now, obviously, if it's a significant storm that causes damage, like we saw Madeira Beach and some other areas last year, then they have to go through the recovery process and what that looks like. But the great part about that is, and I guess maybe being a little Pollyanna by saying the great part about that, is that it gives everybody an opportunity to increase the value of their home, to add new amenities. My parents actually in 2004 were hit back to back by Charlie, Jean, and Francis. That was
Oh,
that unique year. We had the three storms
yeah.
come across Central Florida. Very, very odd. And they ultimately had to rebuild their home. And as they did it, and I talked to my father about it, he said, honestly, Tim, I would have never wanted that to happen, but we were prepared for it. And the truth of it is, we improved our house and made it even better. And now they are 20 years later, still living in the same home and enjoying essentially what is a brand new home that actually at that point was already over 20 years old. So, storms are a part of our life. We understand them. We'll continue to deal with them. But the truth of it is, we prepare for them and we continue to pass policy in the state of Florida, even with home hardening that ensures
Yeah.
that Floridians can get ahead of the storm and make sure that they're doing the right things. As long as you understand what your flood risks are across the nation, I mean, Kentucky's dealt with floods, everyone deals with them. Understanding what your risks are from a flooding standpoint, and then more importantly, that you're properly maintaining your property and protecting the roof, which is one of the most important barriers for defense for protecting your private property, then you're normally in a good place. And the My Safe Florida Home program has certainly been one of the tools in the tool belt to help Floridians prepare
That's
for that.
and Tim, that's absolutely something I wanted. When you said policy and that home hardening, that My Safe Florida Home program, it's gotten a lot of attention. Maybe describe some more of it. I'd spoken over the years with Jimmy Patronis as he was the CFO of the state, just how important he thought that was. Give me some of your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, I'll say CFO Petronas was a great partner for Florida Realtors in working in the creation of this program, as was the governor, the rest of the cabinet, and the entire legislature. The theory is simple. We understand that if we have to pay for the damages from storms after the fact, it's more costly. And let's be honest, it's more disruptive to life, community, and all the goodness that we get to enjoy as Floridians. My Safe Florida Homes is a program that enables property owners to access a grant from the state of Florida by also matching some of their own funds and investment to get their properties prepared in a way or repaired or maintained in a way that's going to be able to weather whatever the storm may be. A great example would be being able to access a grant after you apply for it through My Safe Florida Homes to replace the roof on your home. So you can get up to a $10,000 grant from the state while you also match funds and put your money in as well to make sure that you have the right home hardening in place. It's one of those proactive approaches that Florida Realtors and the Florida legislature have worked on together to make sure that we're preserving what is often the most valuable asset that all of us own. But beyond the asset that we own, the place that we create the most amount of memories and love and connection, and that's our homes. And so we understand that protecting that is important, not just for our communities and our economy, but it's important for humanity and the people that realtors get to serve every single day.
Tim, yeah, we know there's going to be a financial component, regardless of how I'm insured and all of the process, but that emotional component that goes to this is where I live. That's that's a big thing to get over when you suffer damage from a storm. And I'll tell you personally, very fortunate in the storms that we've had in Northeast Florida in the 15 years I've lived in the area. Yeah, we've had damage, we've had roof damage, but minimal compared to what so many people experience. So as we wrap up, Tim, what's your biggest piece of advice to Florida homeowners as we kind of enter into these next few months and really what's going to be the peak of hurricane season when we get to the fall?
Yeah, I mean, specific to hurricanes, it's really about preparation. We know that every single year we're going to have a hurricane season. So about preparing in advance. Are you properly maintaining your property, trimming trees, removing debris, all those basic things? Additionally, listening to what the media is sharing when it comes to preparedness for the storm, following the governor's office and emergency operations to make sure that you're safe and smart. Obviously, there's opportunities to, secure your asset in a number of ways, whether it's making sure you're using sandbags or boarding, whatever the case might be. I think really my message though is this. I've lived in Florida pretty much my entire life now, and I've never had direct fear. And even though I've had to live through hurricanes, I've never had direct fear from it. And what I know is that we always come out on the other side of it okay. And what I would encourage property owners to realize is that hurricanes are a part of life, just like every other natural disaster in any other part of the world. But what you really want to focus on is the big picture in the long term. The most important decision we can make is to buy and own our home and maintain it for value increase and for quality of life as early as possible in our lives. We've seen an unfortunate trend where the median age of the first-time home buyers continue to creep up over time. And so part of my goal and my message is to make sure that people continue to understand that home ownership is one of your number one wealth builders, but it's also the place that you want to make sure that you have an established to grow your family, to live your life, or to achieve your individual dreams. And so my message is simple. If you're a property owner, congratulations. You're sitting on record equity in your property. The home value increases that we've realized over time are to your benefit. And if you need to move, downsize, or upgrade your property, it's still a good time to do it. And talk to a realtor and get the advice about how to best leverage the equity in your home to make the next best move. And if you're a home buyer, then don't think you should wait, because the truth of it is waiting always ends up costing you money. And interest rates are not going to come down enough to where waiting makes any more sense. Home prices are not going to come down. What you need to realize is the most important thing is to buy now. There's an old cliche in saying it's, marry the home and date the rate, right? The idea is pick the home and live in it. And as interest rates change over time, you can always refinance and adjust where you need to. And the message I consistently communicate is that real estate agents and realtors, we're true trusted advisors. So don't just use us for transactions, use us as advisors throughout your home ownership journey. And let us continue to work with you while you're owning a home to help you make sure you know what upgrades to make and not to make, how much money to spend, not what to spend, and then also when to refinance or when to make that move. And when you do that, everyone does well. And the truth of it is, the net worth between a homeowner or renter is so incredibly significant, we can't afford not to own our homes.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful thing. There are challenges that come with being a homeowner for sure, but it's a wonderful thing to know that you're working to own that property or own it outright and all the benefits that come with it. Tim Weisheyer, appreciate it. The president of Florida Realtors, our guest today on This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching, and wherever you get your podcast, go ahead and like, subscribe, and follow. New episodes come out every Thursday at 9 a.m.